Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to have you here today.
Good to be back, Dr. Paul. How are you?
Good. I'm glad to see you back, but a lot of people have been asking about you, and of course you had to face up with a family sadness, your dad passing away in California, and you had a lot of responsibilities, and you've been doing a lot of driving. So, and I believe you when you said, you know, you're really glad to be back, and there's a lot of people in our audience have been asking about you. So we're glad to see you here today.
Thank you, Dr. Paul, and thanks to everyone for...
But I wish I could say things are so much different now. You know, all of a sudden, things have improved tremendously, and we're coming to our senses. And I just wanted to sort of have an update of this. Where are we? This is essentially a year that this has been going on, and you know, it gets worse, it gets better, and of course, this past week they discovered another virus, worse than any, and it's spreading faster than any. For some reason, I'm not ready to buy that one, you know, because so many of the official announcements when it comes from CDC and also from WHO, you know, can you imagine? They actually change their minds sometimes. Just like Fauci and Gates will change their mind and change their positions and say, oh, no, we didn't really say that. And of course, the people that impose all these rules and restrictions on them, well, they don't even believe they do that. And we'll once again point out that there's some of the hypocrisies, you know, of the people who put the rules and regulations on all the other people, but they disobey the rules. And that's an elitism that nobody should tolerate. But there's been so many things talked about in great detail, and we participate in it. And that has to do with testing. We've gone on the pros and cons of testing, and of course our position has been pretty strong that there's evidence that the testing is unreliable, and I'm convinced of that. And so therefore, all policy are questionable because they're based on a test that the majority now are coming around. Even CDC. I think Fauci said,
Fauci himself,
he said that you can't rely on these tests and everything based on that. And then when they collect the data, they find out that it's always supporting a political position, and so you can't trust that either. And then there's the debate going on with masks, and we've talked a lot about these masks, but the country's almost insane. The enforcers and the submissives. You know, you have the submissives over here like this. I got to do it. I can't even walk around the block, and there's nobody outdoors. So you have that group, but then you also have the people that want to terrorize and do it. I guess the part that bothers me a lot on that is the fact that people now have been conditioned and they're participating that if somebody's not obeying the rules and they don't have the mask on in certain areas, they scream and holler at people, and they report you to the city councils, and you know, there's a certain amount of this is totally out of control. At the same time, I think we'll find a couple things where we can say, hey, maybe we're making some inroads. Some states certainly are better than others, and I keep hoping and believing that you know, these hysterical reactions, even they're massive. Most of the time people wake up and back off, but I'm still waiting a little bit on that. But I want to start off with talking about something a little bit more in detail on that Birx. And she's the expert from CDC, and she really likes the regulations. She believes in social distancing. Stay away and wear your mask and this sort of thing. So especially at Thanksgiving time, terrible time to be visiting your family. And we have to stop that. We're going to be really tough. We want to crack down on it. Can you believe that she was caught traveling to her relatives? Isn't this ironic? Doing something so innocent and so safe and so routine turns into a monstrosity, mainly because of all these rules. Of course, even with the disease going around and the the unofficialness of how serious it is. Going to see your family on Thanksgiving is probably zero. But then when you come with these authoritarians and crack down on the average person, say you can't do this and can't do this, and people get into a lot of trouble doing this. And but she can be put in that category of hypocrisy, 4+, because she was gone. She did exactly what she won't permit other people to do, and she write laws against it.
Yeah, she traveled to her beach house. She has a beach house in Fenwick Island in Delaware. She traveled there over the Thanksgiving holiday. This is the same Dr. Birx, of course, who's on the coronavirus task force with Dr. Fauci. She said before Thanksgiving, be vigilant, limit celebrations to your immediate household. Don't go out. But it turns out she went to her beach house. One of her family members blew the whistle on her, said she certainly violated her own guidance, which she did. But like so many of the others, like Gavin Newsom in California, who we'll talk about later, like the mayor of San Francisco, like Cuomo, like so many of these people who love pushing everyone around, when she was busted, she said, I didn't go to Delaware for the purpose of celebrating Thanksgiving, so that makes it okay. Of course, it is okay. That's the point we want to make.
Yeah.
It is okay. But they want to destroy the lives of everyone else. But of course, when it comes to them, they feel themselves to be exempt. So actually, we can put a couple of pictures up of Birx just to kind of underscore. Here she is. It is a reckless betrayal of public trust, as the headline says here. But it actually was something very normal to do. And let's look at the second one. And we talk about this a lot. And I think this, Dr. Paul, if we want to be optimistic, I think this is what might help us get over this horrible tyranny, is that the people making the rules, they know the rules are bogus. They know there's no science behind it because they violate their own rules. If Birx really believed that you were going to get sick and die of COVID if you go to have other people over your house, she wouldn't have done it. Deep down, she knows it's nonsense. She doesn't believe it, and that's why she violates the rules.
The one thing they don't talk much about is how do you solve this problem, because you have the pros and the cons and all this going on and misinformation. Well, you can prevent this type of discussion, and I think we'd all be better off for it, is just developing a system which we know all about because it's a libertarian system, and that is allow people freedom of choice. If you want to wear a mask, wear a mask, because the evidence is that the other people aren't going to jeopardize themselves. And the other thing is, everything is voluntary. If you don't want to go to a group, don't go. That simple little rule would solve all of this. And just think it would have prevented that insane lockdown of the people, that vicious violation when it's extreme, and making new diseases, all psychosomatic and psychological and neurotic and dangerous, people committing suicide, all kinds of evil that goes on just because they won't accept one rule. Volunteerism is the best way to solve social and economic problems.
And if you are terrified of leaving your house, don't leave your house. And let
go.
the rest of us who live our lives. I was at a hotel as I was traveling back from California, which is really a nut house. I mean, it was always bad, but you wouldn't believe how insane California is. And I was in the breakfast room and I was looking at some coffee and looking at some yogurt. And every time I moved, a fellow with a mask would jump to the other corner. And I'm wondering, is this guy insane? Is he on drugs? What's his problem? And then I realized he's got this mask all over his face, and I'm walking in there normal, trying to get some yogurt for breakfast. And as I walked away, in a cowardly way, he said, face mask. So it's the insanity is really there. But there are heroes, and one of them, I have to say, is kind of close to some of us in the room, and that's Senator Paul. Senator Paul gave a blockbuster interview to Breitbart, and actually we have a little clip of that. Thomas Massey retweeted it. Now that's a good tag team, right? Rand Paul, masks are, quote, all about submission. And here's a great quote that Thomas Massey put up from the interview. It'd be one thing if we were told you had to give up your liberty, you have to give up your freedom, we're going to save your life. But what if you have to give up all your freedoms and they're wrong on the science? And it's very, very good. And here's something that he said, and we've done this on the show. Maybe he's even watching the show. But here's what Senator Paul says. Every one of the mandates, and if you look in country after country, state after state. You look at when the mask mandate went in, the incidence went up exponentially after the mandates. Restaurants, nobody can eat in a restaurant. There's no science behind any of it. He also went on to talk about this whole idea that being 12 inches from someone in an airplane instead of 6 inches when they take out the middle seat is insane. He said none of it makes any sense, and there's no epidemiological evidence.
You know, you suggested to me one element for my rule to operate, of volunteerism is you have to find people to participate. They have to have a little bit of common sense.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, these people, the little bit they had, they must have lost it. And the stage has been set, and I don't think it is all set in 1 month or 1 year. I think it's a cultural thing, an educational thing, and a social thing that has, we've been drifting along. And I think a welfare, warfare state teaches people to be so dependent, and also the economic system. But anyway, it's the requirement for submission, and I think that's I think the mask is the great symbol of submission, and it just enrages people who figure if I'm saving the world, I don't want somebody challenging me, but they have to have a little bit more confusion than just that, like they've lost a few brain cells. I think.
It's depressing, even back in Texas, which is definitely relatively more free than California. I go into the local HEB and 90%, 95% of people are wearing a mask. And I just want to ask them, how long are you going to do this? How long are you willing to submit? How long are you willing to listen when they tell you something when there's absolutely no evidence? If anything, on the contrary, the virus spreads on its own whether people wear a mask or not, and there's plenty of evidence for that. But I'm going to do one more quote from Senator Paul, because he does a good job attacking one of the people who should really be vilified, and I hope that history treats him as he deserves to be treated, which is one of the true villains of history. Here's Senator Paul. If Fauci has his way, you'll never give up the mask. It's all about submission. They want you to submit to their will, whether there's any science. In fact, like on schools, I've been telling Fauci for 6 months, the evidence is if you open schools, you will not get a surge. The whole world accepts it except for Fauci. He finally accepted it last week, 6 months after I started showing him the evidence. Very good.
I'm glad he persisted, even though it's awfully frustrating to go, because there's so many motives behind this. There's sometimes a financial political motive, which is very strong in Washington, D.C. And then you have the pressure and the influence of somebody like Bill Gates. That's tremendous. And a lot of people had a lot of confidence in him and didn't realize exactly where he was coming from. But I tell you what, the people who watch our show on their comments, they know exactly where they're coming from, and they're working together. So did you have another thing on RAND, because I wanted to talk just about vaccines?
Yeah, I think ready to move on to the vaccines.
Yes. Well, they've been out for a couple days, maybe a week, and of course the headlines are everything is rosy, except when there's somebody that gets on a video and she keels over about 2 minutes after she gets a shot, which medically is not that extremely, it's not a sign that the world's coming to an end. People can faint, so you can give them a pass a little bit, but it wasn't very good advertising because they were staging it. Look at me, I'm a nurse and I know about it. And then she keels over. So, and I think that's what's going to come out of all the promises of safety and efficiency, effectiveness of the vaccines. But a lot of people have gotten them. There was a headline on Zero Hedge over the weekend that said thousands of reports have floated in. They have ways to call in to report. I don't happen to, and I don't think the article tried to pretend thousands, have a severe, complicated, problem from the vaccine. But they happen. But it's so early.
Yeah.
It's so early. The complications can go on for years. But they have admitted there's been several cases of anaphylactic episodes. That's not complete anaphylaxis when they have total paralysis at all. Again, that is very, very dangerous, and that is what killed a lot of people in '76, when more people died from the vaccine than they did from the virus. Today, it's going to be hard to tell. It has always been hard. That's our complaint, because they don't give us the right information. We don't know how many people die, from the coronavirus.
Yeah.
Because now the evidence is building and building that the test is no good.
Yeah.
The test is not reliable, and the way it's run. So everything is based on that test. At the same time, it's unreliable, but still, look at what is at stake. What if they didn't have that test?
Yeah.
Or they had a test which was just perfect and easy to do. You're negative, you're negative, you're negative. Rather than having one that you could get pretty good results from, but if you distort the test and run it searching, for a positive and not run the test as it should be, and you get more positive, then base your science on it and your medical treatment on it, then you end up with this. This is why there's millions of people now who are suffering from the overreaction with the lockdowns, and they're getting furious. And I think as time goes on, someday they might just recall a couple of bad people who've been doing this.
Yeah, that's a hope, and we'll go into that in a second. But this is not a conspiracy. This is Fauci himself, as you suggested in your opening. Fauci himself is on tape saying, if you run the PCR test, which is the main test they do, more than 35 cycles to magnify these little bits of virus or whatever it is, if you run it more than 35, it is not accurate. You're having a false positive. And we know that in the U.S. they're running it at well over that, into the 40s they're running it, just looking for anything they can find. And the question about, we say, what is the reason? You say, if there wasn't a test, would we even know? If there wasn't a test, we'd be hearing a lot of people are dying from this new flu, from this new virus. If you're sick, stay at home. Wash your hands. If this sort of thing would be normal. But the other thing, and I read an article about this a couple of days ago, Dr. Paul, this testing industry is huge. Hundreds of billions of dollars now are going to these testing companies. It's a huge industry, and that's one of the reasons why driving. When was it ever in the history of humankind that you had to get a test to know if you had a sickness? You'd normally just say, I'm sick, I got a cold, I'm sick. But now everyone goes and gets tested over and over again. Hundreds of billions of dollars are moving. And now we have the vaccine. We can actually put up a couple of these links. A vaccine is 90% effective against a disease with a 99.9% survival rate. The numbers don't add up. But this is what you were talking about. Here's, they stopped vaccinations in Illinois for a while after they had adverse reactions. Now they're back to vaccinating. And here's the second one, Dr. Paul, on the vaccines, if we can do this one. This is what you alluded to when you're opening. CDC issues new guidelines and launches probe after thousands negatively affected following COVID-19 vaccination. This is from the CDC. As of December 18th, which is a couple of days ago, 3,150 people reported what the agency terms, quote, health impact events after getting vaccinated. The definition, and this is according to Zero Hedge, which you see here, the definition of that is, quote, unable to perform normal daily activities, unable to work, required care from doctor or health professional. So these aren't people that have a little bit of a sore arm where they got a shot.
Right. That one demonstration was interesting where they were doing it for PR purposes and they didn't have any vaccine. I mean, that's how bad it is. You wonder, are they just goofing off or what? They get caught at these ridiculous things. When you mention about all this money going into these testing groups, when money becomes available, and especially when it's prodded by the Congress and the people, do it, where there's such a serious problem of it. In economics, that's called malinvestment. And you can't do it when you just can print money at will, and then you have central economic medical planning.
Yeah.
It's going to go in the wrong direction. So it's probably pretty safe to say that testing investing, probably, there's no doubt, in a free society and a free market. I mean, we lived a long time in this country where most of that was done with private money. You know, even one of the very first vaccines for polio was done with private money. Another one was done by the government. So I see that as part of the problem. But one other thing that has occurred just recently is they've been basing, I don't know what they based it on, but and it might be related to the drugs. All of a sudden, hydroxychloroquine was the worst drug you could ever have, unless you talked to somebody who was treating patients for it early on, and who they were practicing medicine in the true sense of the word, that they weren't locked in on everything the DEA say, you know, that the government was telling you how to use it. And they've been using it a lot, and it's been successful until they needed it.
Yeah.
So, but this past week, it was announced that the AMA rethinking their position, think maybe it is worthwhile to take. And I don't have the final word on that, but from my understanding, I think it's a good drug. I think people should, well, of course, should be allowed to use it.
Yeah.
But I think the best evidence is that it works better when people get it earlier.
Mm-hmm.
But if you wait until somebody's critical and on a ventilator, not much works by the time that happens, their physiology has been interfered with too much.
Yeah. And, you know, again, people should have the option, you know, to do what they want. We want to move on, actually, and just do an update on Newsom, the California governor, who really is a really bad person. I mean, there's no question about him being a bad person. He's dining at a place with, I think the meal is about $1,000 a plate. Well, he told everyone to stay home. But this is a little bit of good news, Dr. Paul, and it's the recall effort. And I remember back in California, not too long ago, a few years ago, they recalled another governor, Gray Davis, who was a nightmare as well. Not anywhere near as bad as Newsom, who's just awful. But here's the good news, Dr. Paul. And as I say, I've just been in California. Recall Newsom signs are everywhere on the side of the freeway, in neighborhoods, everywhere. Leaders of the recall effort announced this month they'd collected 800,000 signatures, over half of the 1.5 million they need to collect by March to put the issue on the ballot. So they definitely have momentum. Over half as much, only in about a month's time, signatures they need to put a recall on the ballot. And of course, the opponents are saying this is just a PR stunt. This is just, you know, it'll never happen. These are kooks. These are nobodies. But if you go, as I did, and drive around California and see the heartbreak of store after restaurant closed, and the people just looking shell-shocked, this was not done by a virus. This was done by very, very evil people, and Newsom is one of them.
I just wonder how many states permit the recall, because they certainly need the position of the recall up in New York to get rid of a mayor and a governor, and that state's getting worse and worse. When you think of the tragedy of what they've done to these cities and to the people, just think of the tragedy that they've done to the schools and the kids. You know, our area has in recent years, say in the last 3-4 years, a tremendous amount of money spent on the government school system. They look like nice building. It'd probably be a nice place to go to school and all. But right now, I just visualize when I see this, is they're not really being used. Some schools are open, some schools aren't open. But basically, the school system has been wrecked. The building and the spending and the money and the control of authoritarian type teachers union, it hasn't done a thing. The kids are still suffering, and that's where the real frustration is, where the kids suffer this way. But hopefully, you know that Newsom gets recalled, and other people will get some guts.
Yeah, I think that might encourage people. And everyone I talk to in California hates what's happening.
Right.
And it's terrible. But speaking of that, you wanted to talk a little bit about this whole issue of neighbors,
Oh boy,
spying on neighbors, turning them into the police, and what has happened to this country.
Well, you've had your own experience that you alluded to today, somebody that was sort of watching you and doing this. You know, I don't go very far. I don't venture too far away from home. Maybe I still have a friend or two because, and I stay out of the places where they're most likely, you know, to do it. But I've had because I'm sort of prepared for it and I avoid it, which means that I'm not out there confronting them. But I hear a lot of statements made, even in a town like Lake Jackson, which is not real good about this subject. And so many people are wearing masks. But the real tragedy is if you go to the big companies, the big shopping areas, Kroger's and other places, they're all very obedient and they have the people. And but if you go to the smaller stores and bars and who knows what, even some medical facilities have been closed. They're starting to open again, but even those get closed, and people will. What I guess is very annoying is the average person. They can't be totally average. The person who's sort of sympathetic to the mask are so aggressive.
Yeah. Very aggressive.
They get aggressive, and even if they're not next to you and say, you know, it'd be nice if you wore a mask or something like that, shouting and yelling, and what are you doing out here, trying to kill us?
Yeah.
You know, it's hysteria.
Yeah.
It's a collective hysteria that exists, and we'll get rid of this, I believe. But it's going to be slow, and there's always going to be the frustrated authoritarians, the elitists, who say, oh, the world's going to fall apart. Who's going to tell them what to do? Who's going to tell them how to save themselves? Well, I have a simple way to how to tell people to save themselves. Mind your own business and take care of yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And there's so many of these people with these authoritarian personalities now, and they love yelling at people. I do have to mention, I don't want to get anyone busted, but I did happen to notice your son-in-law and granddaughter over at the local store without a mask on. We were looking over there and saying, who are those? Those are some great people. Oh, I recognize that.
Oh,
That's
they went to the store for me. They were braver.
Yeah. So that was great to see them like that. I had a couple of just some charts to throw up in the end if we wanted, because this is really, what we're talking about is the masks do not work. We knew that from the beginning. They don't work. They're a tool. They're a manipulative tool. As the other Dr. Paul said, they're all about submission, and they're working. Let's throw up a couple of charts too that you'll never see if you watch the mainstream media. Here's California and Florida. This is very important. You see on the left in Florida, most restrictions removed. Fauci says Florida asking for trouble. And then look what Florida's done. Yes, they have had an increase because it's called a seasonal flu that people get. But look at California. Closed indoor dining November 16th. Statewide curfews November 20th. Closed outdoor dining December 6th. It had zero effect on hospitalizations per million. They've gone up regardless of any measure they've taken. Let's look at the next one, please. These are just a couple I grabbed. And here's Denmark. This is public transit mask mandate August 22nd. All indoor spaces mask mandate October 29th. New cases per million skyrocketing, no matter what they do. They can't explain this. Let's look at the next one, please. Mississippi and Alabama. This is something that's fascinating, Dr. Paul. They have both followed the exact same trajectory when it comes to daily new cases per million, even though they have different experiences, different mandates, different expirations of mandates. The virus follows a certain pattern in different climatological regions of the country. We're seeing that over and over. And here's the last one, my last word on this. This is something that came out literally as I was getting ready to start the show, Dr. Paul. So, but it's Justin Hart. This is worth reading. Do mask mandates work? Our analysis below. We looked at cases on days where mask mandates were in place versus when they were not. We calculated the cases per day adjusted for the population. With mask mandate, 27 cases per day per 100,000 people. No mask mandate, 17 cases per day per 100,000 people. These are the kinds of actual bits of science and research that are showing that the mask mandate, not only does it not stop or prevent, it actually causes more harm. So
Very good.
okay, I'm finished, Dr. Paul.
Oh, okay. You know, the showing these graphs, I think, are very, very important. Especially you've shown it so often, where you show the deaths that come, and they talk about it, but when you see them, they really don't go up, even though they're saying it. I saw a report just now that there is a significant, a noticeable increase in deaths from some type of viral or problem. But this is a horrible story that at the border they're shipping children over unattended by their parents because they're ill. And they're sick and they're dying, but they're all thrown into that category of, you know, now the virus is attacking young people. You know, when you show those charts, and we do that frequently, it's like they have their blinders on. They don't look at it, and they probably don't look at it. If they did, they don't probably understand, or they don't want to understand. But it's not an eye problem. I think the distortion is somewhere inside their brains and in their emotions and in their morality of profiteering, and how they go along with the elitist group, because you got to be a member, and then every once in a while you see these people breaking out. But you know, AMA has never been, you know, for the doctor-patient relationship, and I don't know exactly where I had my influence back there in the 60s, because I was doing medical school in the 60s, but I started private practice in 68, but then the AMA, and they still send me join the AMA, but I was never even tempted to join the AMA, never believing they represented at that time the definition of what I was looking for was freedom for the doctor-patient relationship, that I had freedom to practice medicine, and the patient decided whether I'd be any good or not. And that is something that has happened for a long time, but I think it's a shame on what's happening, because it's bureaucratic. You know, it's bureaucratic medicine, it's corporate medicine, it's corporatism at its worst. And then you see, even the private practice doesn't exist. Everybody belongs to a corporation, and almost all of them. But they go in and they join the corporation, and some of them, you know, once you join the corporation, doctors helped a lot of people out. They would always change it, you know, their numbers. It wasn't like, you know, to do this test it's $100, but the person might be poor. You know, it might be somebody, well, I'm not going to charge this patient $100. I'm going to give it to him for $25 or something. Now, the corporations highly resent that, because the corporation doesn't make as much money, and they do the billing. So it sure is. I think I really just got in the end of private practice medicine, because I started, like I said, in '68, and Medicare and Medicaid didn't exist, and it never engulfed me. But I just really believe that the principle of a doctor-patient relationship is so vital, but you can apply that principle to everything. How about the patient or the customer businessman relationship? You have rights and you have rules, and the businessman, you go to stores and restaurants, the places that you know and trust and think you'll be treated fairly. But that's long gone. Now you go and all you get to is an empty room and boarded up, and thousands of these businesses are going out of business, and thousands, tens of thousands of people becoming unemployed. No sweat. We have this thing called the Federal Reserve. Yes, we did make this mistake, and we contributed to lockdown, and a lot of people are unemployed because of what we did. We'll just send them money every month. And that's going to come to an end. Believe me, it's going to come to an end. But government creates the problem, creates the unemployment, and then turns around and all they do is they're just anxious to destroy the money, because they say one of the tests they're waiting for is to see how we can get inflation back again. Well, ask some middle class people, poor people, whether there's any inflation out there, because they're always short of money and can't pay their bills and they can't pay their rent. So we talk about a problem, and we've keyed in on this coronavirus and whatnot, but it's a big problem too. It's the concept of the relationship of the government to the people, the protection of liberty and the responsibility of the individual, because ultimately it all comes together. Right now, medicine and medical care has been engulfed by this whole principle that government and the elitists there know what's best for us. I suggest there's a much better way. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.